So what do microbes do for plants? They provide nutrition. They do this both by mining nutrition in the soil, by eating decomposed plant and animal matter, and then bartering with plants for those nutrients, okay? And they also store nutrients in their cells so that when they die, it's sort of stuck in the soil as soil organic carbon that plants and other animals can later eat. They create soil structure. So when people talk about water retention and aeration, that is driven a lot by microbes, okay? So microbes do that, and we'll talk about more. They do that both by making aggregate soil homes and also by stimulating root growth. And when those roots, as long as they're kept in the soil, decay, where the roots used to be become little caves where air and water can then live and be stored. And they're also an integral part of a plant's immune system. That can be said as humans as well, right? All the rage is about your gut biome and its role in your immune system. Same thing with plants. Symbiosis, so that's the key word when you talk about microbes and plants. There's a sophisticated marketplace. So plants and microbes trade things back and forth, right? A plant's job is to go photosynthesize, take carbon out of the atmosphere, drive it into the soil, use it to make their bodies, and trade with microbes for enzymes that microbes make and nutrients that microbes mine with the plant so that the plant gets the things that the microbe needs and the microbe gets what the plant makes. So if anyone was here for Glenn's talk about how plants, when it gets cold, store all their nutrients down in the ground and then pull it back up, that's what we're talking about, that they run it through there. So plants trade organic compounds through there. It's estimated that a plant will give 30 to 50% of all the stuff it makes to the microbes in exchange for other things that the plant can't make. So when you talk about conventional and sort of, I'm saying organic as a system, but you can talk about regenerative, all the words that make sense. When you talk about an environment that has synthetic fertilizers, conventional agriculture, we're essentially feeding plants directly through chemical fertilizers, right? It's as if you lived on a feeding tube, or for some health reason, all you could eat was inshore, right? You would certainly be alive, but I'm not sure you'd feel or look that good, as opposed to organic fertilizers. And most organic fertilizers and amendments feed the microbes, improve the soil health, and then those things feed the plant. So it's a different concept, okay? You're not just giving sort of sugars to a plant when you're in an organic system. You'll do things like put down a compost, right? And what the compost is living organisms, organic matter, decaying plant matter that then the microbes in the plants can uptake instead of just throwing down some nitrogen that a plant will eat up. And you can see, although that's not a great picture, synthetic fertilizers do not encourage good root growth, right? Which means they don't encourage soil structure, water retention, or really plant resiliency, both in a nutrition standpoint, but also in a stability standpoint. Roots hold a plant in the soil. And if you have poor roots, it's not in the soil quite well. This is a demonstration of a plant above ground and below ground when you feed it synthetic fertilizers. And you could say, particularly in the case of the nitrate, there's very little root structure growing, right? If I can get my mouse to work, I can't. Because the plant doesn't need to take its energy and make roots to mine its own nitrogen. It can just slurp up the stuff that you threw down. And crops. Plants and microbes communicate via hormones back and forth. And there's growing evidence that the current conventional seeds and crops have been designed either chemically, GMO, or just sort of from selection to work in a conventional atmosphere. Meaning they're very good at eating chemical fertilizers. They're less good at working with microbes. So a lot of people, I'm sure in the homestead environment, use heirloom crops, different seeds. You know, they don't just go to to Bayer and buy, their corn seeds and put them in the soil because they might not grow that well. This is a really busy slide that talks about the plant microbe cycle. Again, the plants will mine things from the air and the sun and the atmosphere, feed it down into their roots for their own storage, and also to barter with microbes back and forth. There we go, interdependence. So that topic was talking about nutrition and how plants and microbes share nutrition. This area talks about microbial diversity. We talk about the importance of microbial diversity for a couple reasons. One, microbial communities are interdependent. Microbes are very small, they don't have a lot of DNA. This sort of shows the relative DNA of all these different creatures. And the funny part is, apparently grapes are much more complex than we are in terms of what's there. Although they're apparently, I thought it'd be very easy to figure out how much DNA you have, but it's, of course, like all things, not that easy. But you can see that down there, influenza and E. coli, they just don't have a lot of stuff. So they can't make all the things they need to live. So they rely both on plants and on each other. So microbes barter with each other for different substances. So for you to have a robust population, you need lots of different kinds of microbes so that everyone can trade, right? It's like living in a village where everyone's a cobbler, right? At some point, you're gonna need bread, okay? So you want everyone to be doing something a little bit different. And this is a slide of sort of 24 hours after inoculation. This is just a standard Petri dish. And you can see after 2 months, it's not just that there are microbes, it's that, you can tell by the color, there's lots of different ones, and they grow over time. So if you leave a community there to grow, it will stimulate the spores. As one microbe will start to grow, it'll stimulate the spores of another microbe to grow, and so on and so on. This is a very exciting picture of Minecraft. Anyone with kids knows this is a Minecraft village, and they're just trading back and forth in it. Yeah, there you go. I got he's finally a slide he likes. I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep going. One concept that's really cool, I always put it in here just because it's interesting, it's called quorum sensing. And microbes are like, I like to call them they're like bandits, they're running around, and if you have good ones and bad ones, but if you get enough bad ones, they'll get together and they'll make trouble. Microbes will do the same thing. They do it through quorum sensing. It's how they communicate with each other. If you have a big, diverse microbial population, it kind of self-regulates to a certain degree. But if there's stress or something else that's going on, it can allow certain microbes to get to a population if they're virulent or can be pathogenic and sort of break through the natural immunity. The example, I put it there because I always forget it, is streptococcal bacteria, which causes a strep infection. Right now, we all have strep on us, right? We have it in our nose, we have it in our mouth, we have it in our skin. Hopefully no one has a strep throat infection, right? But if we really stressed you or you're immunocompromised, those strep could get together, start multiplying, and when they get to a certain level, they'll tell each other, let's go, and they'll get you an infection. Same things happen in the soil, right? So even if you have the best soil and the best conditions, it doesn't mean you're never gonna get a pathogen, right? It just means that hopefully you'll get fewer pathogens and they'll be sort of less destructive, okay? So even if you're the perfect human doing everything right, you will eventually get sick, right? But hopefully it'll just be a couple days and you'll get better, right? The third thing that microbes do is create soil structure. This is probably the most important when people are talking about restoring soil that has been maybe conventionally farmed, right? It's very compact. If it rains, the water all washes away, right? You put fertilizer in, but then next year it's all gone. It's because of soil structure. So for soil structure, and if you look at soil and it falls through your hand, bad soil structure. If you pick it up and it's clumpy and sticky and smells good, right? That's there. So soil structure, I titled it How to Make Your Own Home, the Microbe Edition. Microbes form these things called soil aggregates, and they're basically microbial homes. A bunch of microbes will get together. They'll secrete this sticky substance that has a name I cannot pronounce, so I took it off the slide. This is my mother's slide. She could say all the hard words, but what they'll do is they'll get together, they'll attach themselves to particles of soil, right? Mineral particles, rocks, and they'll secrete this sticky substance, and they'll sort of protect themselves. They'll make a little air pocket, right, to live. And then, like all things, sadly in their life, which is very, very short, it'll sort of break apart, right? And the microbes will die, and the cell walls will lyse. But that sticky substance is stuck in the soil, right? And then, right, because the microbes have bodies that are full of nutrients and carbon, the next generation will come up, eat their grandparents, it's a tough world to be a microbe, and create a whole nother soil aggregate. So they're constantly creating these aggregates that even if they fall apart, are still creating soil structure. These little aggregates make teeny air pockets and water pockets so that when it rains, right, and that's why really good soil, when you do the infiltration, the water will go right in, right? Because there's all these little spots for it to go. Again, this is more about how they build soil structure, that sticky substance. There it is, it's called extracellular polymeric substance. And that's what they do. On our test, we have a test for soil microbial life. One of the hardest things is figuring out, if you want to look at microbes, how do you get them unstuck from soil particles, right? Because you don't want to be looking through a microscope at a pile of sand and silt, right? You want to be looking at microbes. And so our test uses classic salt, which is corrosive to plants, and whisking, which just kind of spins them around till they kind of fall apart a little bit so that the soil can precipitate down and you can have sort of a microbial soup. But in very healthy soil, it's hard to differentiate, to get those microbes off the soil. The food, what do microbes eat? Microbes eat decomposed organic matter, right? Which is why when you talk about regenerative farming, you never want to have bare soil. You want to leave the roots in. You want to leave the stuff down. You want to have fresh, decaying plants in the soil. Stable organic matter is humus. That is sort of last year or last decade's old crops and animals that are stuck in the soil. Living organisms, they don't actually eat a lot of living organisms. Sadly, that would be each other, so that's a good thing for them. And fresh residue. Fresh residue would be sort of, if you threw down a compost tea that had a lot of molasses in it, which is what a lot of compost tea, that's sort of, we call it like the Diet Coke or the Coke of the food supply. It's stuff that they can readily eat. Carbon stores. So soil organic carbon, if you heard Glenn talk about, is incredibly important in terms of soil health, crop resiliency. And microbes are a really big part of making sure that there are carbon stores into the soil. They do this by decomposing plant matter, which is mostly carbon, and sort of leaving it in there. And then their bodies are half carbon, right? Because they traded for the plant who mined the carbon out of the atmosphere. And when they die, that carbon is in the soil. Carbon stores come in two forms, soluble and stored. Soluble is kind of the stuff that you can eat more readily, and stored is stuff that's a little bit harder. Having good stores of soil organic carbon can help your soil and your crops through tough times, right? And that's the stuff that takes a long time to build up. I know Glenn acted like he did it in a year, but I'm sure it took him years and years to get his soil organic compound up from 3%, which frankly is awesome, to 7%, which is really quite phenomenal. And when you have that much stored soil organic carbon, you have a lot of resiliency in your soil. Microbes increase food security in soil. So this is just a funny little picture. Priming meal, say you throw down an algae amendment, right, with microbes in it, which are terrific. I know Redmond Minerals has a bunch of good products. They're here. And Cosgrow Organics has products too. You throw in a priming meal and it's terrific. And if you have good soil, good humus, good stored organic carbon, right? The next meal is healthy soil, right? If you're in healthy soil, you drink your Red Bull, you feel really good. Next meal, you can eat something good. if you have crappy soil and it's unhealthy, you throwing down a Red Bull and having nothing in the fridge the next day, you really haven't done anything long-term for your soil. So when we talk about inputting microbes or something that's food for microbes into the soil, because a lot of the amendments are essentially microbial food, you want to make sure that you're putting it in a practice plan that has both sort of that priming and also enough long-term food for those microbes for them to continue. When I think about microbes, I think about a virtuous and a vicious cycle, right? So Glenn at Alderwood Springs is in this amazing virtuous cycle, right? The cattle come through, they eat down a little bit, they leave their manure, right? They improve the soil microbes and the soil structure, and then the next year it gets better and better. If you're in a conventional environment where you're tilling all the time, which kind of destroys a lot of the fungal content, and you're throwing down fertilizers, you're in a vicious cycle, right? Each year your soil will get more depleted. So you can't just do something quick like throw down an algae supplement and think that'll work. You might have to do things like compost, selective tilling, right? Or you might need to feed those microbes for a year or two more often than you would normally. The role of microbes in plant immunity. I didn't touch on this a lot because it's really, really complex and I didn't want to not do it justice. But we do know, again, in our bodies, our microbes are a huge part of our immune system. Some of them have antimicrobial production, and when they say antimicrobial, it must be against pathogens, right? They're not just trying to kill themselves. They compete for resources, right? So they won't let the more virulent pathogenic ones grow too big. There's enzymes that are produced. There's very complex communication between a plant and the microbes in the soil, even so that when a pest will come through, the plant will send signals down to the microbes to create essentially medicine to get rid of those bugs. So again, you can go down the rabbit hole on the internet to learn about it, but it is incredibly interesting to learn about that. And quorum sensing again, because I like this slide. So again, microbial existence, diversity, and size will help with immunity because it will prevent too much of virulent microbes running out of control. Another very interesting topic is rhizophagy. So I have a book that's sort of a beginner book about it. This is slides that I stole from Dr. James White from Rutgers University. I did cite them at the end, so don't get me in trouble. Rhizophagy cycle is when microbes are taken into the body of plants through the root hairs, okay? They are either fully consumed or they are just traded inside the body of the plant and then excreted from the plant. And it's clear that microbes even go up into the plant roots. Anyone who grows cannabis knows that I forgot what that part of it, part of the flowering plant are soil microbes in there. And bacteria promote root hairs. This is a picture of a seed that was sterilized and then one that was not. And you can see the one that was not have microbes that are stimulating root hairs growing on the plant, because root hairs are how microbes get into the plant and trade with plants. And you can see, not particularly well, that on the tips of these root hairs are where the microbes can go into the plant. So what are the benefits of rhizophagy? The plants absorb the nutrients from those microbes. It increases the oxidative stress, so there's a lot of antioxidants that are created in the process that are in the plant. So when you talk about like eat spinach, it's full of antioxidants. This is how the plants get those. It's very blurry. But there's also signs that there's a lot of immunity help through that cycle. And here is a slide that's much too complex that goes over, but it talks about how the bacteria go into the plant, how they're processed, and how they come out. And if you see this slide, you can see that these are the bacteria that are inside the cell walls, okay? This shouldn't be news to us because we have microbes in our gut all the time, right? And they live there quite happily for the most part. So now you sort of have a very big understanding of what soil microbes do for plants. How do you build and maintain that microbial life in your soil? And there's really no easy way to do it. So I'm not up here to be like, don't worry, in 3 easy steps, you too. It's a very hard process. Anyone who's here has been working on it for a long time. You're not just one and done, it's a long process. But the goal is for you to create an optimal condition for microbes to grow and flourish in your soil. And they can do that if they're given the right conditions. And you can continue to use some fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides as long as you do it to make sure that you're not supplanting the role of the microbes in the cycle. Again, this just talks about the role of healthy soil and healthy microbes in a growing community, which is immunity to pathogens, digestion of litter, protection from erosion, and resiliency. So what's the optimal microbial level of your soil? There is none. It depends on where you are. We sell the microBIOMETER all over the world, including in Australia. Australia has dry desert soils. Their microbial loads are quite low, right? They might have a number that's 200 and have a party. If you had that here, it would not be a very fun party, right? It'd be sort of too low because the capacity of the soil, say in Montana, is a lot better. The things that influence it or soil composition, just what kind of soil is it, right? pH, for a lot of these I put natural and created, right? A lot of the soil that we're all on has been disturbed, right? Either a little or a lot, but some of the conditions that we're dealing with are natural and some are essentially man-made. So compaction, again, can be a natural feature of the soil. If you have a ton of clay, it's just not going to be light and fluffy no matter what you do, right? But some soil is compact because we have compacted it, right, through our practices. Stores of soil organic carbon, some can just hold more than others, and that's just a fact of life. I live in Washington State. You go out to the rainforest, I mean, soil organic matter for days, right? You couldn't try to deplete it if you wanted to. Temperature, seasons, salts and other chemicals, either naturally in the soil or because of farming practices, and water availability, right? If you're going to irrigate, not irrigate, or there. This last slide is just sort of a nod to the work that homesteaders, organic farmers, regenerative farmers are doing in terms of the research. A lot of the advances in growing practices have been because farmers are out there saying, this doesn't make sense anymore. So I know there's not a lot of us, but I appreciate you guys being here, and I thought that I would sort of stop talking sooner to see if people wanted to share either their experiences or their questions. What I will say is don't ask anything like, I have a particular pathogen, what should I do? Because I don't know, but maybe someone does. So I thought we could have a more informal discussion at this point about that. Yes?
Nitrogen is a farm for the bacteria and the fungi.
Yes.
Is there any trade-off from the air? Air is 65% nitrogen. So is there a...
I should know that.
I mean, I've heard that lightning makes urea and changes nitrogen.
I mean, there are nitrogen fixing cover crops, right? So the nitrogen comes from somewhere. So I would assume that nitrogen, and again, I'm a little embarrassed, I'm going to do some research, but yeah.
That's kind of an out of the...
Well, it shouldn't, because we think about, it takes carbon out of the atmosphere, puts it to the ground, that's like, we all know that, but yeah, I mean, it should be doing that as well. And there are cover crops that you put in that are nitrogen fixing, right?
That's what I would have said was nitrogen fixers naturally deposited in there with their little rhizobia.
Yeah.
From the air?
From the air, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Take from the air and then they put it in the little rhizobia, the nodule on the earth.
Yeah, so that's,
And then every time, like if you
Yeah. And the other cool thing about that is if it's mining the nitrogen from the air, it's putting it into its roots, right? Perhaps it's trading with the microbes. The microbes will have nitrogen in their bodies. And the microbes will die, and that nitrogen is there in the soil, right? For another microbe to come pick it up, trade it with the plant. But yeah.
Well, and so then really like if you can have a diversity of plants growing together, that
Yeah.
would be the best thing, right? And control based on what you want to grow, but then you want the others there for the health
Yeah, and
diversity.
yeah, and the diversity discussion, it starts at the microbes, but it goes to the plants. So I keep talking about Glenn because I'm such a huge fan. But I asked him, I said, on your pastures, which it's 49,000 acres. I said, you throw down seeds, which would be ridiculous, right? I mean, I don't know how long that would take. And he said, no, you just if it's healthy, you let it go, right? First will be invasive species because they do really well in tough environments. But as things get healthier, it will sort of self-moderate. Yeah. And yes, I mean, absolutely. Different plants will do different things for the soil. They'll stimulate different microbes. They'll fix different things in the soil, which is why monocropping, right, combined with tilling and chemical, exclusively chemical herbicides and pesticides are tough on everything, including the people that eat that food, because it doesn't have that resiliency in it. Yeah.
That's what I started doing, was growing everything together, and then the ones that are overtaken, your desirables, cut those off, feed, and then just put it down in the mulch.
Yeah.
And then your other ones have sunlight and stuff, so then when it breaks down, it slowly feeds,
Yeah.
the roots are still looking together.
And that's why a lot of people will roll and crimp a cover crop, right? To leave it in there so that whatever nutrients are both in the roots, the plant and the microbes stay there, right? They're not taken out. But like I've seen farms where they do a cover crop and then they'll glyphosate it. And you're like, well, why would you bother? It's worse than doing nothing. I don't know. They're like, well, we had to terminate it somehow. I was like, I don't, or burning. Burning is,
That's almost the same thing, right? Doesn't that take your succession to 0 also?
I mean, if you had to pick between the two, I think I'd do burning. But yeah, I know in a lot of African countries, burning is
Reinvigorates certain grasses.
yeah. Yeah. So I think it's one of those things that in certain places was a good idea, and maybe people were like, let's burn it all,
The Indians used to do it in the plains.
Yeah.
It gets rid of the dead, it reinvigorates the plant.
Mine brings true grass.
And your ash,
Yeah.
ash puts into the soil.
Well, now people are buying biochar, right? Which biochar is a terrific product, but you read about biochar and then you read about burning. I'm like, I mean, biochar is a different process, but I was like, oh, that sounds pretty similar. Like, although when you burn, a lot of the carbon goes up, but yeah, I mean, there's times to do things and times not to, right?
The big cover crops, you put nitrogen back in oats and peas. Because they put a lot of nitrogen
The oats?
in the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta go.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
The sterilized seeds that didn't have any root hairs, are those used in conventional farming?
No, that was a PhD student undoubtedly doing that. But I do know, and one of the slides touched on it, but I stopped talking, is that seed companies will take monocropped seeds, they'll clean them, and then they'll coat them in bacteria, right? But plants naturally coat, as do humans, I have to say, if they're born the right way, coat their babies with bacteria, right? So the microbes will come up into the plant and then they will be coated onto the microbes. the microbes will be coated onto the seed so that when the seed drops and grows, right? So, I mean, even chickens coat their eggs with things, right? So you can, like I was in Africa, we had eggs. You left them outside for like a week in the sun, no one cared. And in the United States, people lose their mind if they sit outside for 20 minutes. And it's, I don't know how true it is, but it's, you know, because in the United States we wash and sort of disinfect them, and ironically it makes them very dangerous.
So theoretically, would it kind of be a good idea to suck on your seeds before you plant them?
No, but there are, I think it's the Johnson Sioux people. There are, and the Native Americans used to do this as well. They would have seeds and they would sort of pre-soak them. I wish it was the coolest talk I went to. They talked about how coating seeds isn't something that Monsanto invented, right? People have been doing it for a long time. They'd take their seeds that maybe were overwintered and they'd put them in, I think it was like roots of grasses or something that had microbes, and then plant them. But I don't know if your mouth is what a plant needs, right?
Well, we eat the plant,
Yeah, it's
and so everything that's in the soil's in our gut, so I just thought it was all.
yeah, and a lot of a lot of heirloomed, which just means they haven't been sort of mucked with, for a while, are just better at staying coated in microbes and and symbiotically working with them. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, even we're all women now, there's clear evidence that babies born vaginally are just much healthier than babies born cesarean because they get inoculated on the way out. It's sort of cool when you think about it, it's all the same, right? It's all the same biological process that goes through. No.
Ask you, someone else had a question, but are you familiar with the PLOF test? PLAF?
PLFA?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, PLFA,
Oh, yeah, no, PLFA is enough.
phospholipid fatty acids.
Does it tell you microbes?
So PLFA, Haney, respiration, Solvita, and our tests are all different ways of measuring microbial population in soil. PLFA sort of explodes the microbes and looks for certain substances in microbes. Some people are a big fan of it. Some people think that it's missing things. It's hard for me to know. If people are getting actionable, useful information from a test, that's all that's important. Respiration test measures microbial activity. Often it's done on soil that's dried and reconstituted, which in our company we sort of think is a little odd. And microscopy is frankly sort of the best way, right? I think we talked about the Food Soil Web, Elaine Ingham's group. You can get trained in how to look at soil and identify microbes. I will say that using a microscope is very, very difficult. It takes a lot of training, and it's really hard to scale. But it is sort of the best way to do it. Our test is sort of designed to mimic microscopy, right? Using a cell phone because we wanted something quite low cost. But that's it. But yeah, PLFA, I think it's mildly expensive too if you want to do a lot of it. And you do have to send it away and get it back. And different people have different feelings about all the tests. But, they all have their pros and cons like everything else. Yeah. Good. Well, thanks. That's it. Small audience. And I even recorded it. I'm so excited. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
This is your soil.
Yeah, that's the